ground up.
Hello guys, and welcome to my presentation on nitrogen management through the lens of sustainability. So to start off, we ask ourselves the question, what is sustainability? So sustainability has been a common buzzword thrown around, but
I don't even know what that means.
No one knows what it means, but it's provocative.
No, it's not. It's
Gets
gross.
the people going.
so I like to think of it as basically the intersection between fulfilling social needs, environmental needs, and economic needs for the present time and the future. But how can we apply this concept to viticulture and nutrient management? So to elaborate more on the three-spear model, I came up with the 4 P's of sustainability. So you want to just keep your plants and your planet happy, the people, that being your consumers, and also your neighbors and your community happy, and also your pocket happy. You want to be prosperous, have a prosperous industry as well as your own personal business. Another thing to keep in mind when managing nitrogen, I think, is the 4R system of nutrient stewardship, because we are farmers and we are preserving the land. Is to consider the right source, the right rate, the right time, and the right place. And as shown here, I kind of map out some of the things we'll be discussing in this video and just how you can apply this 4R system specifically to nitrogen management and plant nutrition. So then I kind of thought of it as you combined your 4 P's and your 4 R's, and that equals PR. So this is good public relations. So using these systems, hopefully you'll be able to efficiently communicate with your consumers the practices that you're using and the reasons to do so. So again, just some reminders when we're trying to set up our nitrogen management strategies, just kind of an overall outline of what we want to accomplish. We want to provide grapevines with enough nitrogen to meet quality and yield goals, match nitrogen supply with the demand through the use of tailored rates and timing applications, minimizing inputs of fertilizer nitrogen by improving soil health, and minimizing nitrogen losses from leaching and runoff. Alright, so now we'll discuss the source of nitrogen, that being naturally, and sources that we can supply back to the ground to replace any deficits. So as an intro, I'd like to discuss the importance of nitrogen to the grapevine. Nitrogen is a building block. It's essential for vine growth and development. It is used to build amino acids, nucleic acids, chlorophyll, and anthocyanins. So continuing our understanding, it's important to understand nitrogen transformation and uptake. So nitrogen gas makes up 78% of our atmosphere, yet this form is not available to our vines. So nitrogen is going to undergo these transformations that allow the plant to uptake the nutrient. This is known as the nitrogen cycle. So vines are going to acquire almost all of their nitrogen from soils in one of the 2 mineral forms. These are the ions, nitrate and ammonium. So to get started with understanding this cycle, let's talk about nitrogen fixing. So nitrogen gas is converted into ammonium by nitrogen-fixing bacteria. Some of these are just free roaming in the soil, others have associative or symbiotic relationships. Decomposition is another way that nitrogen can be converted into ammonium. This is when organic matter such as feces, dead tissue are decomposed and consumed by the bacteria, and then they make the conversion. At this point, ammonium can be acquired by the vine, or it can continue to undergo nitrification. Take a look at the role of cover crops. So we got legume cover crops and grass cover crops. So legumes are used to increase the available nitrogen concentration in the soil because they actually can fix their own nitrogen because they have this cool symbiotic relationship with these ribosomium bacteria that are hanging out on the roots. And grass cover crops are actually used to increase nitrogen competition, so to reduce nitrogen that's available to the vine. So it's going to reduce the vine vigor, leading to an increased grape quality due to less shading of the clusters if your vines have an excess of nitrogen. And just general other benefits of cover crops, they increase biodiversity, they can help prevent erosion, and are an alternate food supply for pests. So kind of next up in this process is nitrification. So after the gas is converted into ammonium, it's going to go through these oxidative processes to eventually end up to nitrate, which is the form that is most available to the plant. So there's many different fertilizer options available in both dry and liquid forms. As you can see, like urea, ammonium sulfate, calcium nitrate, diammonium phosphate, and so on. What is interesting to note that Ross actually mentions in his video on nitrogen management is calcium nitrate. It actually has a basic effect on the soil. It's not buying. So though it's a higher price initially, it's actually going to be cost beneficial in the long run. So now we're going to look at how we can determine rates. So here's a general table of assessments of nitrogen status. You're going to be looking at your trellis fill, kind of cane pruning rate, so how much nitrogen dry matter was absorbed, kind of your leaf color and size, shoot growth, fruit yields, ripening and your general fruit quality, and also bloom petiole nitrogen concentration. So what are some signs of nitrogen deficiency? So here I've listed the visual signs, which can be a little tricky. So like the color of the leaves will get a little bit lighter. You'll notice some slower shoot growth, shorter internodule length, smaller leaves, sometimes an unusual red color of the leaf petioles and short stems. This applies to most grapes except Riesling, and a general reduced crop yield. So how do we sample for nitrogen? Soil samples are not effective for this method. There's so much variation because nitrate is so mobile and is so soluble, and you're not going to get very consistent results from the sampling. So petiole samples should be done and conducted at bloom to determine the nitrogen concentration. So your target for this sampling will be between 1.2% and 2.2%. And here on the side you can see another Cornell YouTube video to kind of explain how to do that. So that's when nitrogen is deficient, but actually nitrogen can have damaging effects when it's in excess. So excess nitrogen is going to increase the growth, and you're going to have some high vigor and overgrown canopies. And rapid shoot growth, internodes 6 inches or more. The leaves are going to be abnormally long, a deep green. You're going to get some delayed maturation of fruit. This is probably because of the congested canopy and not enough sun exposure, decreased fruit quality, low fruit yield, and the cane prunes weight are going to extend over 0.4 pounds per foot per row. And again, like the petiole sample taken at bloom will exceed that 2.5%. So here's just some recommended rates of soil applied nitrogen. The general rule of thumb is 30 to 50 pounds of actual nitrogen per acre, but there can be some variability depending on how you decided to distribute the nitrogen, as well as the soil type and your grape type as well. All right, next guys, let's dive into the timing of nitrogen fertilization. So here's two graphs of nitrogen uptake and partitioning. On the left here, you see a study of Thompson seedless grapevines, and you see that absorption doesn't really start picking up until bud break. So any application of fertilizer before this would be very inefficient because the vine is really just taking nitrogen from its reserves instead of absorbing it from the soil. So it would increase leaching risk as well. And on the right here, we have nitrogen partitioning. So just a good idea to kind of keep in mind when nitrogen is absorbed, how it is stored in the plant. So when we are pruning and we are removing the fruit, that is a pretty good indication of how much nitrogen we'll have to restore for next season. So just to really hit it home here, though nutrient demands are very high during canopy growth, the most efficient time to apply nitrogen fertilizer at this point is going to be between bloom and veraison. So next we'll get into the final R here, the right place. So we can apply nitrogen fertilizer in the soil or also follicular applications on the leaves. So the soil is used to supply nitrogen to the vine. It should be applied where the vine roots are really concentrated. The best way to do this is through drip irrigation. So the follicular application can be used to increase the VIEN. This is actually a pretty cost-effective approach to increasing VIEN for winemaking since it is cheaper to apply this than DAP. So now that we've gone over some practices of nitrogen management, it's important to ask the question why. Why do we care about being sustainable, and how does malpractice of nitrogen affect sustainability in general? So just some basic background on nitrogen use. Half of all the inorganic nitrogen ever used on the planet has been applied in the past 15 years. Nitrogen is the most commonly applied fertilizer in agriculture. Nitrogen in the form of nitrate is highly soluble and very mobile, and excess nitrogen applied on farms can cause contamination of grounds and surfaces, which can have adverse effects on health of humans and animals, as well as environmental degradation. So it's putting sustainability at risk. So how does nitrogen malpractice put sustainability at risk? It can affect your plants and your planet. So it can cause environmental degradation, algae blooms, dead zones, hypoxia, acid rain, and air pollution. And on the plant side, In the vineyard, malpractice of nitrogen fertilizer can result in not only lowered fruit quality and congested canopy, but the leaching and water contamination is the big one here. Reduction of soil fertility through acidification. You're going to have some weed growth and also increase the risk of pests and diseases. So next up, we got people, not only your community, but also your consumers and your customers. So the World Health Association has adopted a 100 parts per million nitrate maximum standard for safe drinking water. However, as seen in the map in the corner, this is not always fulfilled. And certain health risks associated with high nitrogen concentration include reproductive complications, including increased abortion rates, methylobromia, or just like a lack of oxygen. Infants at higher rate for this as blue baby syndrome, and various forms of cancers. So though vineyards don't have as huge of a contamination impact as other ag sectors do with contamination of water, it's just really important to understand how customers perceive industry practices, because ultimately the people are going to be the ones controlling your profit margins. They're your customers. And I just really like to compare what U.S. Farmers and Ranchers Alliance has on these kind of statistics of just what consumers care about and what they think they know versus what farmers and ranchers view about their consumers. It's just kind of an interesting dynamic, some food for thought here. How generally far removed the average consumer is from the vineyard and from the farm. Alright, so let's talk money here. So in a New Zealand study, 75% of consumers surveyed would prefer an environmentally sustainable wine, and actually around 70% of those consumers would actually be willing to pay a price premium for it. So there's a lot of financial motivators to doing your nutrition program, your nitrogen management correctly. Just looking at it from the farm operational costs, there's an upward trend for fertilizer pricing. It's not getting any cheaper. So any fertilizer that's not being used by the plant is a loss. And if your vineyard is not getting enough nutrients, it's not meeting its nitrogen requirement, you're going to get lower yields. So this is just lower profit. And then if you're over fertilizing your vineyard, you're risking an excess in nitrogen, too high of vigor, reduced crop quality. You're going to have to deal with the canopy management. Again, lower profits. So in general, just think like this. If you have non-profitable, like unproductive plants using resources and occupying important land space, this is just not a sustainable practice. And just shifting gears a little bit with marketing opportunity, there's just increased consumer demands for sustainable products and kind of just knowing where their food's coming from. Also, competitive advantage for shelf space, and then also the potential to obtain these eco-premium prices. So there's just a slide on a general summary and reminder of things to keep in mind in the vineyard. So in conclusion, nitrogen management, nutrition management is an essential part of viticulture, and this is no easy task. But I hope looking at the decisions that you're making and looking at your practices through the perspective of the spheres of sustainability, as well as the 4 R's of fertilization and nutrition stewardship, that you're able to not only optimize your resources, but get into a correct mindset to be able to even communicate what you're doing to consumers. Because as consumer demands shift, they're wanting more sustainable products, they want to talk about it, and they want to know where their food and where their wine is coming from. And even as climate change and climate issues continue to rise, it's just really important to understand your role as a land steward and your role in taking care of the land and communicating the great things that you do. I mean, you're growing grapes so that people can pour joy in a glass, and ultimately that's just an awesome thing. So cheers, and thank you so much for listening to my presentation.
We'll give all that we have and we'll build